All right, good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. I have to say, even though I'm a teacher, this is my first time actually emceeing an event, so I'm quite nervous about this. So thank you so much to Oddfellows for having us. This is the very first edition of Blue Ridge Story Space. And my lovely wife, Jane, and we moved to the area in June. And so we've been talking about having something like this since really before June, but we've been unpacking since June. So it's only been in the past month that we've been able to really sit down and talk about what this should look like. And we both are big fans of The Moth out of New York City, and those of you who listen to NPR, you've probably heard the Moth Story Hour. So this is very similar to Moth. Moth is actually a story slam, which is a story competition. This is not a competition, and this is not professional storytelling. This is you and me getting up as a community and telling stories to each other and preserving and giving homage to the wonderful mountain tradition of oral storytelling, which I've missed so much because my wife and I have lived the past 10 years in Atlanta. Oh my God. Yeah, very different place, which we love, but we're glad to be here. So I wanted to explain a little bit about how this works. Some of you I know read about it, and again, this is very, very casual. This is a very safe place. This is not competition. There's room for vulnerability. There's room for mistakes. We love all that. We love imperfection because imperfection is beautiful. So what this is basically every month we get together the same first Saturday of every month from 5:30 to 7, and we announce a theme. This month's theme is It Was a Big Mistake. And when you enter, there's a hat right here and some Post-it notes. If you want to tell a story, and you don't have to, you can just come and listen, but if you want to tell a story about that theme, you can just put your name in the hat. And then we will just draw names, and when we get to 10, then we're done. So that's how it works. Now, right now, I'm a little concerned because I only see 3 names in the hat. So hopefully, some of you will volunteer once we get going. And there is a time limit on the stories, but we're not going to be really stringent. Nobody's going to come if you reach the time limit and yank you off the stage or anything. But we want to say something like 5 to 7 minutes. A story with a beginning, middle, and end. So I did not really come prepared to tell a story. However, because there are only 3 names in the hat, and because my beautiful wife has suggested that maybe it will be better if you start, especially since you're one of the organizers, I feel coerced. So I'm going to go ahead and start. And for me, when I was thinking about this, I wasn't going to tell a story, but thinking about if I did tell a story, I thought, man, I've made so many big mistakes. I don't know how to decide which mistake actually talk about. So what I decided to talk about tonight is something that I thought would be one of the biggest mistakes of my life that turned out not to really be a mistake at all. So I lived the past 10 years in Atlanta, and it was a very diverse place, a very open place, and it was a place where if Jane and I wanted, we could walk down the street holding hands. Nobody said a word. Nobody gave us any kind of weird looks. And I was lucky enough to be out at the school where I taught. And this was downtown Atlanta, so it was a wonderful thing to be able to be out, to have the kids ask me questions about, what does your wife do? What did your wife get you for Christmas? And these were such normal, everyday conversations. And then we moved here back to the mountains. And I have to tell you, I'm from here. So we didn't move here with blinders on. I'm from a little town that's way smaller than Floyd, Honaker, Virginia. It's near Grundy. And so I grew up there, and I left 20 years ago. And one of the reasons I left is because I was pretty sure I was gay. And I unfortunately associated the mountains, even though we had bought a house here, I associated the mountains with a lot of negativity, and especially homophobia, because it was my experience, especially because of the church that my parents and I attended. My pastor would get up and he would say things like, God save us from the murderers and the rapists and the sorcerers and the homosexuals. And so I grew up thinking, oh my God, I'm like a murderer. I'm like a sorcerer. I'm like a rapist. I mean, oh my God, So as you can imagine, I left the mountains as soon as I could and didn't look back. Well, 10 years living in Atlanta was wearing on me. I loved so many things about the city, but the traffic and the lack of infrastructure was driving Jane and I berserk. So we wondered, where do we move to? And I always loved Floyd. I'd gone to school at Virginia Tech. So we ended up buying a little house here in Meadows of Dan. And I say this because now I'm teaching at Patrick County High School, very close to here in Stewart. And it was a very different experience for me being completely out in the classroom. And then when we moved here, I thought, I'm going back in the closet for sure. I'm not telling anybody. There's no way I'm telling the kids. And that was kind of how I've lived my year until probably the first week of November. And throughout the year, and I love my kids, and they're really, for the most part, kind, generous, beautiful people. But they only know what they know and what they've been exposed to. And I kept hearing since August, I kept hearing the F word, not which bothers me even more than the first F word. So I kept hearing that since August over and over and over again. And when I first heard it, I thought, my God, what do I say? And I felt this burning in my heart and my soul, thinking, oh my God, that's about me. And the kid, I don't know if the kids even realize what they're saying. So the more I heard it, and it became clear that they were saying it like the word park, the word street, the word school. They were saying it so much, they had no idea what it actually meant. So I thought, okay, I'm going to take some of these kids in the hall and just talk to them and just say to them, hey, do you know really what you're saying? This is really inappropriate. Well, let me tell you, that had zero effectiveness whatsoever, having those conversations, because the next days, the next weeks, I would still hear the F word, all over the place. And the more I thought about it, the more it bothered me. And it always takes a while to build relationships with kids. So I didn't want to come in August and really, I wanted to tell them some things about myself. But frankly, I was really scared because I knew where I was. I had such a negative association with the mountains, with my experience in the mountains of Southwest Virginia. So the first week of November, and I have the most wonderful co-teacher who is here, Rainey, who has witnessed all of this. Rainey and I started talking about what it would look like if I came out in class. And she encouraged me, and she was very loving and kind, but I was still scared to death. Patrick County doesn't exactly have a non-discrimination clause when it comes to sexual orientation. Hopefully they will soon. But they don't. So I knew that I could be fired. So it's a very dangerous thing. Well, I guess I was just feeling moved one day, and Rainey and I had all these conversations, and I guess it was one of those things where the straw that broke the camel's back happened. I heard the F word loud and clear. Somebody called somebody else that. And I thought, I just can't do this anymore. I have to do something about this. And I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. I certainly didn't plan this. So I have this huge dry erase board in class. And I wrote the word fit in huge letters, spread across one side of the board to the other. And, once you do that in a 9th grade English class, there's really no going back. So I looked at what I did, and I thought, what am I supposed to do now? What am I even supposed to say? I just can't deal with this word being said over and over again. And so I stood back, and I was trembling, and I looked at the kids, and some of them were trembling, And some of them were laughing. And I said, you know what? Do you know why I've talked to so many of you outside of class about this word? And I said, it's because I'm gay. I have a wife. And every time you say this word, it absolutely breaks my heart. And I looked out into the audience, and some of my students started crying. And then I started crying. And I realized they didn't know what they were saying. They didn't know what it would do to me. They had no association that it was anybody they knew or anybody they cared about. And by November, these are my babies, and I'm like their second mother. We cared about each other very deeply, and I saw something that I had frankly never seen before, of kids really doing like a complete 180 in their mind. It's like when that light bulb turns off when you're seeing a concept. I saw that, but it was like in the soul. And I said to the kids, I said, do you know that this is like saying the N-word about somebody who is black? And they said, what? We didn't know. And I said, you are all really kind people. And I know you would never say the N-word about people because you're kind. And to do so would make you cruel. And you're not cruel people. But do you know that when you say the F word about people like me, people who love you so much, that you're being really cruel and you're not cruel people? And so, the kids said, why didn't you tell us? It's November. Why didn't you tell us? And again, I'm practically weeping. And I said, because I thought you wouldn't love me. I was afraid. And so we ended up having, a really beautiful experience. That was first period. And then they left, and I said to Rainey, oh my God, I have to do this 2 more times today. So I did it second period. I did it third period, practically shaking every single time that I did it. And shaking not only because of worrying the kids didn't love me. I wasn't really worried about being fired necessarily, although I could be because I'm gay, but worrying about just what the kids would think. And it brought back a lot for me about sitting in a pew at a church and our pastor preaching what he did. And he preached so much hate guised as love. And it was a very healing moment for me to be able to tell my students the truth about me. And since then, I've been so thrilled because, we don't talk about it daily. Nobody says, I'm sure they say in the hall, she's the gay teacher, but a lot of good things have happened because of that. One is Patrick County High School is actually getting a gay-straight alliance, believe it or not. Something I never thought would happen. One of the kids came to me and said she was interested in organizing one, and I was blown away. And I talked to the administration, and I wasn't sure if they would give us any problems or not. And they said, yes, move forth, go, do it. And sometimes, every now and then, one of the kids will say, hey, Dr. Presley, what did you and your wife do this weekend? And that really thrills me because that's an ordinary conversation. And I want to be an ordinary conversation. So that's my story about what I thought would be a huge mistake that really wasn't. Okay, so we have some more names here.
This is a story about 2 mistakes. One I made and one another person in the story made. Many, many decades ago, I was a graduate student in biology at William & Mary. And I was studying ospreys, the big fish hawk, out in the Chesapeake Bay. And my project involved going in a boat to lots and lots and lots of different osprey nests all around Chesapeake Bay and climbing up to the nest and counting the eggs, and if there were chicks, I would weigh the chicks. We knew when the eggs hatched, and so no one had ever really documented how heavy osprey chicks got, how quickly they grew, whether having multiple chicks in a nest made a difference, and things like this. So I was a very, very proud young scientist. And one day, I was out in my boat. Ospreys often nested on duck blinds. They were just these lovely structures out in the water that the ospreys liked. And there was one nest up on a duck blind. It only had one chick. And I knew this chick was pretty close to being able to fly. And my mistake was not realizing it was old enough to just about fly. So I pulled the boat up to the duck blind, tied off the boat, climbed up in the duck blind, walked over to the nest, and just as I got to the nest, actually it wasn't little anymore, the young osprey flapped its wings 3 times, lifted off the nest, and then just glided down. It wasn't a very good flyer yet. Glided down about 300 yards out into the Chesapeake Bay. And so undaunted, I hopped down off the duck blind, and the water wasn't very deep. So I thought, well, I'll just wade out to the osprey. And so I'm wading along, and the bank is dropping off, and finally I'm bouncing up and down on my tiptoes with only my head out of the water, sort of looking like a volleyball floating on the Chesapeake Bay. And so while I'm slowly making my way to that osprey, off in the distance I see a crabber who's been out checking his crab pots, and he's puttering along in his little skiff, and he's making a beeline for the osprey too. And I'm not sure what crabbers think of ospreys. Do they think they're good things, or do they think they're something that you should kill? And so as he gets close to the osprey, he bends down into his boat and pulls out a great big stick. And I'm thinking, oh no, not right in front of me. And he gets to the little osprey, or the big osprey, and he uses the stick to fish it out of the water and plops it into his boat. And I think, oh good, that's wonderful. And so my head is still bobbing along at the top of the Chesapeake Bay. And he turns his boat around and comes over to me. And so you have to imagine there's a little volleyball right down there that he's talking to. And he comes over to me and he says, "Are you supposed to be doing this?" And in my best happy voice and smiley face, I was going, "Oh, yes, we're working with the Fish and Wildlife Service, and we're working with Virginia Game and Inland Fisheries, and I'm at the College of William and Mary, and this is a very important study on ospreys," and I started to tell him much more about osprey biology than he wanted to know. And so finally I realized he was okay with me being there, and I said, "I'll just take the osprey from you and carry it back to the nest." And he acknowledged that was an okay idea. And he bent down in the boat to pick up the little osprey, and he picked up, it was on its back, so he put one hand on each side and lifted the little osprey up. And that was the second mistake, and you'll see in a minute why. He then said to me, "Hold the head. Those things really bite. Hold the head." And I said, so I had 2 hands on the head and the shoulders, and he was handing me the little osprey. And "Do you have the head? Do you have the head?" "Oh, yes, I have the head." And just as the osprey got about halfway between, well, it was more like a third of the way between him and me, and was upside down, the little osprey with its 2 talons reached up and grabbed the guy right in the crotch. And all of a sudden, his face changed. And he, in a very quiet voice, said, "Don't pull. Don't pull." And I assured him I would not. And I held on to the osprey while he, very delicately, pried back the talons, which actually turned out to be much more important than the head, handed me the osprey, and then he turned around and puttered off in his boat, and I bounced back through the water holding the osprey over my head. We got up to the duck blind. I climbed back in the duck blind, put the osprey in the nest. I did weigh it. Although I acknowledged it was wet, so it wasn't a very good weight. But and then I got in the boat and went away. So that's my big mistake. Okay, the next person is Rick Brown.
Well, good evening, everyone. My story is a lesson in contrasts and growth. So a few years ago, actually a few decades ago, I was in the Coast Guard in California going to school, and I had a couple of roommates. We hung out a lot. We'd go to San Francisco, we'd hike or do whatever. And a few weeks before I was to graduate, one of my roommates said, "There's something I want to tell you, but I'm afraid of how you'll react." And I said, "Well, as long as you're not gay, you're okay." He said, "No, that's not it." I said, Did you kill somebody? No. Did you go to prison? No, I'll just tell you before you graduate." So I graduated and I forgot all about it. So a little afterwards, I sent him a letter and said, "What is it that you wanted to tell me?" He said, "Well, I am gay, and I didn't tell you because of how you felt about these people." And the lesson in contrast is, you were talking about Atlanta. My brother is gay, and I lived there for a while, and just the exposure to him, his friends, turned me around with my perspective of that. And I want to go back real quick. I sent a letter back to this guy and said, I still disagree with that lifestyle, but you're a friend. I'm not going to, just disavow that. But we never kept in contact. So that's really my story, and maybe it's a lesson for others too. Thank you.
All right, everybody loaded up on food and drinks? All right. So our next person is going to be Beth Ford.
Get the breadcrumbs off. There you go. All right. One of my biggest mistakes was expecting someone else to live my dream. When I was 7 years old, I had an epiphany. I had a zapping by the Holy Spirit, if you will. I've been raised in a small town in the mountains of north central West Virginia. But that summer, we had traveled up to New England for a family wedding. And my father, who often liked to do this, said, "Let's cross the border and sleep in Vermont so that you can say you've been in Vermont." So we crossed over into Bennington. And the next day, we drove the little road through the skinny part of the bottom of Vermont. And we stopped at a roadside park at Hogback Mountain. And I put my 10 cents into those big binoculars and climbed up on and looked through, saw the rolling mountains, the green mountains, and that's when I felt zapped. It was like, you're supposed to be here. Part of your soul is in Vermont. I was 7. But I embraced that. I knew I had gotten the message. So from that point on, I started collecting pictures of Vermont on my walls. Like other people had the Beatles, I had Vermont farm scenes. I studied and fell in love with people like Calvin Coolidge and Snowflake Bentley, and started drinking vinegar and honey because that was an old Vermont farm folk medicine. So, but life goes on. And as the years passed, I went to Australia as an exchange student, went to college, met my husband. He had thrown the I Ching. He was from Baltimore and ended up hitchhiking to the hills of West Virginia, one of the back to the landers. Much like Floyd had many, so did we in West Virginia. And so here I was a local, and I married one of them. So we lived in an old farmhouse, first earning our living by traveling, betting on thoroughbred racehorses. Now, I'm from a very strict Methodist family, so I had to send postcards as if I was visiting Monmouth Park Beach or something, not the racetrack. So then I got pregnant and went back to the farm, had a home birth. went to nursing school, and the marriage started getting a little shaky. So what do? You do a geographical fix. And this is where I brought my dream and expected someone else to live it. I told my husband, I said, let's move to Vermont. And he looked at me like I was crazy. I said, no, let's do this. This is going to save our marriage. So we decided we would travel. He agreed to maybe living in New England. So we traveled up one summer. The little boy is 3.5 at this point. And we traveled up New Hampshire, part of Maine, and then up Vermont. Right through the middle of the state is Route 100. And when we got clear to the very top, just miles from the Canadian border, I said, pull the car over. And I started describing the scene. I had never been there before, but I started describing this town. I said, we're going to come up over a hill. There's a Catholic church, a beautiful lake, a railroad station, a main street with a Chinese restaurant. I mean, I had this detail down, and I don't know why. It was just there in my mind. And by golly, when we got up over the mountain and came down into Newport, that's what the town was. And I knew that's where part of my soul was. And so I said, we found our town. And John Ford said, no way, what am I going to do? Milk cows? Make maple syrup? We're going to Burlington. We're going to the city. So that's indeed is where we ended up, in Burlington. Once again, my dream, but being lived through and with other people. Well, we lived 8.5 years in Vermont. I became an Alzheimer's nurse, working night shift. He had various jobs. Our son got to be 8 years old. We lived in a little village. It was okay, I thought, until my son's teacher called from our little school, Heinsberg Elementary, and she said, I have to tell you what your son shared in show and tell today. And I'm thinking, oh my, okay, what's this gonna be? He shared that his daddy's committing adultery. And I'm like, holy, what am I going to do? So, we got divorced. And at that point, we lived on this lake in 2 different cabins. Taylor could walk between Dad and Mom's. We did this for 2 years. And then at that point, John Ford said, and Taylor Ford said to me, Mom, we've lived this Vermont dream of yours for 8.5 years. Now will you come and live our dream? And I said, okay, what are we doing? He said, we're moving to Florida. And I said, Florida, at least it's not Mississippi. Okay, we'll go. And so we moved down to Florida. And for the next 4 years, we lived together, all in one house, because it was my son's dream that his mom and dad were going to raise him. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is my co-teacher at my school. I don't know what I would have done without her this year.
Good evening. My name is Rainey, and I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. But I was thinking when Crystal told me about this, I was like, what can I say? What can I talk about? And it made me think of a time back when I was about 16 is where it started. I met a girl named Marcy. And Marcy and I worked at the same summer camp. And like I said, I was about 16 when I started there. She was the horse instructor, and I was the nature animal caretaker. We had a pig and some ducks and a little lamb. And Marcy and I had a lot of fun together. She was just so much fun. She was always willing to go, willing to do. And she had made me this cassette tape that we would play in her, I guess it was a Mazda or something. It had 2 seats and a little hump, in the middle. And it was great. It had songs like Milli Vanilli and Prince's Erotic City. And we were like, it was awesome. So we would ride around in her little car. And we stuck together for, I guess, many reasons. We didn't have a boyfriend. We didn't have friends, or I'm not exactly sure. But anyway, she was nice to me, and we had a lot of fun. It was just always like, Marcy's ready to go. We're going to go to the bar. We're going to go hop on a boat with some strangers. We're going to chase the Dudley boys. And the Dudley boys lived at the restaurant, or they lived right by the restaurant. There was Eddie and Matt. And Matt was the first boy I looked at like, oh my God, he's so cute. And he was really cute. And he and his brother lived at the Dudley, well, they ran the Dudley store. So we would chase them around the lake, and they had a boat. And it was a really nice boat. And for some reason we called it the cruise boat, which is the dumbest thing I can imagine calling the boat, really. But we called it a cruise boat. It was really cool. You could be up on top, and then they had a downstairs. And the downstairs had like cushions around, and they had mirrors. And to go back and do what I know now, which I didn't know then. I wanted to do something, but I was, I didn't know what to do, and I was scared, and I was 16. I was like, cool, okay, let's ride around the lake. And we would ride around with these guys and chase them, and we had a lot of fun, but nothing ever happened, and it always ended up in the end of the evening. It would always be Marcy and I. And I was like, Marcy, we do the most romantic things together. We're on our horses, we're seeing sunsets, and we just sort of laughed a lot about that. And she was a good friend. But then I got a boyfriend for one summer. And I think that might have been the turning point where I could see that Marcy was my friend or Marcy was not my friend. It's sort of those things where you know somebody's got your back. And she always had my back through, car wreck, through, like I said, hopping on boats with strangers, working at a summer camp, working with kids. She taught me how to ride a horse. And that was a lot of fun. So that's where I'm going to go now, is this horse riding. She taught me how to post. So I was doing this little English saddle thing, riding around at the lake when we weren't working at the summer camp. And she would, on the weekends we'd ride either in her cool car and go to bars, or we would, and she had a fake ID, she did. Or we would ride horses. And she had a horse named Cruz, and he's kind of like that horse, if you've ever watched The Legend of Sleepy Hollow with Bing Crosby and the Big Headless Horseman horse, this big black, awesome, big strong horse. And she knew how to ride a horse, and she knew how to teach me how to ride a horse. She put me on the most beautiful horse named Belladonna, and she was brown, and she had hair and eyes and eyelashes, and just was very gentle because we were at a summer camp. And those horses were to take children around. So I would ride Belladonna, and I learned how to post, and we'd ride out in the field. And at the end of the day, Cruz would be ready to come home. So Belladonna would turn around and ride with him, but he was ready. So we went from, trotting to cantering, and then all full out gallop. And I didn't really know how to seat my weight very well. Now, if you've ever been on a horse, you have to be able to stay on the horse. And I knew how to sit on it, and I knew how to post and feel pretty up there, but I was in my 20s, so I was a lot smaller, and I didn't know how to seat my weight. And if I had it to do over now, I could hold my own on that horse, okay, because I'm bigger. So anyway, he would full out gallop when we'd get home, and I would just be bouncing all over the place through the field and just be glad I got home alive. And that was all good and well. But the years went by, and Marcy went off to school, and she was from Radford, and that's where I went to school. So she went to Wilmington, and it was the time of Hurricane Hugo. And any of y'all remember Hurricane Hugo around here? It was a pretty big deal. So she left Wilmington and came home to Radford, which is where I was at school, where we had a Hurricane Hugo party. So it involved lots of drinking, I think, and then Marcy ended up with my boyfriend. And now he wasn't exactly, he was sort of my boyfriend. He ended up being my boyfriend. But Marcy and he hung out for the evening, and I'm not real sure what happened there, but it was sort of one of those things like, you are my friend, but you may not be always my friend, but we can still hang out, and we did romantic things, sunset and horses. And it was like, haha, you kissed my boyfriend, okay, whatever. And then she went off back to school, and about 4 or 5 years later, we got together again because she was in Radford, and that's where I was. And we did a lot of crazy things. We got our car. We went back to the camp we were. We looked up the Dudley boys. We called them. We stayed in the Motel 6. It wasn't that great, but it was, anyway, we did all these things. And then we ended up back at Radford at a horse ring because she was training a horse. And this is where some of my mistakes come in. First of all, I think I was young and naive. And sometimes I trust people, maybe I shouldn't have. And then Marcy was like, hey, let's ride horses. And I'm like, okay. And she tells me the first thing I should have been alerted to is that the horse wasn't really broken that well. It was in training. And like I said, Marcy was my friend, but I could kind of tell sometimes she would be smiling and joking with me, but at the same time, in the same smiling face, she might make fun of me a little bit, which, I could deal with. That was fine until she put me on this horse. And I got on the horse. The second thing I should have been alerted to that there was a problem is she gave me a helmet. So I have a helmet on, and I'm on this wild horse, and it's just a ring. So I'm thinking, what could happen? It's going to be okay. So I get on the horse, and it's been several years since I've ridden a horse, so I've forgotten how to post. And, there's Western, and then there's, I guess, the English, right? So I'm trying to post, but every time the horse bounces, I go forward like this. And the helmet is too loose, and it keeps covering my eyes. So I'm like this every time. And I look stupid, and I'm laughing, and I'm thinking, I'm going to die, And Marcy's over there thinking, that's my friend, I'm going to kill her. It's really what I'm thinking she's thinking. She must have wanted me dead. So I'm bouncing around, and the helmet's going, and then all of a sudden something bad happens. I don't know what it was, but the horse got spooked, and my foot went through the stirrup. Not out of the stirrup, but through it. So this is not good at this point, because if your foot's in the stirrup, if you get thrown off the horse, you're going to get hurt. And I didn't want to get hurt. I was thinking, this is not good. Things over my head, I'm bouncing around, my foot's in the stirrup. And then I finally probably make a bigger mistake, and I lived, and everything was okay. But I thought, I do not want to be dragged by this horse. I do not want to break anything. So I'm going to hold on. I'm going to hold on real well. So I grabbed its neck. And I've been told that that's not a good thing to do. I knew it wasn't a good idea at the time, but later they told me that sometimes horses will roll and stuff. But I held on. I put both arms around the neck. My foot's through the stirrup, and the thing's over my head. And I go at least 2 or 3 more rounds, and then the horse stopped. It didn't roll over. It didn't kill me. But I've never been on a horse. I haven't been on a horse again. But when I got off, I gave it the what for and yelled at it a few times. And I was like, thanks, Marcy. This is fun. And it had been a while. It's been 30 years or so. But I have Facebook friended her. And I think she'll stay there, just on Facebook. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Christy. And my story is about the way it started, this mistake, was, the Blue Ridge Outdoors newspaper that's free, and it has all these great ideas of fun things you can do. You know, and you imagine yourself as being very adventurous and, you know, capable of doing the things in the magazine. So Ricky and I, my husband, we were looking for a fun thing to do on a weekend. And so we were reading this magazine, and it suggested, one of the little suggestions was to go to Bryson City, North Carolina, and to kayak the Nantahala, which I thought sounded like a great idea. So we had kayaks, and we had been on several very peaceful rivers and lakes, right? So we figured we were very good kayakers. And that was, you know, you can see where this is going. So you know, we're riding the bus. You have to ride a bus to get to the put-in site. See, it's a lot of white water. Like, I was getting really nervous, but I thought, you know what? When you need to try new things, you need to be brave, and you need to just go for it. And, you know, it's okay to be nervous. I'm sure it'll be fine. And so, anyway, we put our kayaks in, and it took about 30 seconds for us to start cruising down the river, hit some white water. Don't know what to do, obviously, because we've never done that. And we both dumped our kayaks out. We both ended up, you know, with our heads out of the water, which is great because this is definitely a stupid mistake that could have been bad. Ricky lost his paddle, though, and I have to admit, I was really glad he lost his paddle because it meant we couldn't keep going. So we pulled our boats out onto the side of the river, totally wet and cold and demoralized and feeling really like stupid, you know. And so we we stashed our boats in the woods, and we like stumbled out of the woods, you know, up onto the road, and we walked back down the road to catch the bus to get our cars, to bring our car back to where we could drag our boats out of the woods, still wet, cold, demoralized. Anyway, it was a lesson in remembering that just because those magazines make it sound like you can do that, it's, you know, you really need to think it through and figure out whether you're good enough to be as cool as those people in those magazines. And the answer is you're not.
Hello, everybody. My name is Justin. I am a recent graduate from Virginia Tech as of last month. So my story is going to be about, thank you. My story is going to be about my college experience, but I'm going to give you a little bit backstory before that. So when I was 16, I participated in my first environmental leadership program, and since then I've always considered myself an environmentalist. And then that following year, my senior year of high school, my last semester, I took a philosophy course, and before then I had never really thought about how my actions affected other people. I've always been pretty empathetic, and if I could see I was, you know, immediately hurting somebody, I would think that was bad and felt remorse from that. But if I couldn't see how my actions were affecting others, I really didn't think about it until that moment. So that led me into an existential crisis that continued throughout college. My freshman year was an eye-opening experience. I had like no work ethic in high school. Everything until then came pretty easy to me. So I panicked pretty much right away, and work was really overwhelming. I remember my first round of finals, I was in the shower of my dorms with the hot water on at 3 o'clock in the morning, just like balled up crying for hours. And finals were fine. I did okay. I did relatively well in school. So my freshman year, I also had joined a fraternity, the Jewish fraternity, AEPI, and I did that because my brother was in a frat when he was in college, the same one, and I thought it would be a good idea, kind of. So I didn't really intend on joining it to begin with. I just went out to their events, and then one of the events I went to, they didn't tell us, but we had pledged our allegiance to our fraternity at that event. And so I unknowingly became a pledge of this fraternity, and I was in that for a couple of years and did way more partying than I wanted to. And while I was doing all that partying, I wasn't really thinking about myself, and I was taking really poor care of myself as a human being. And it led to episodes of depression and anxiety, and I was diagnosed with ADHD in 7th grade, and I've been like upping my meds since then. So I was at like a really high dose of ADD meds, and I wasn't sleeping at all. So I went like a day or a period of 3 days without sleep, and that was like one of my hardest times in college. But I overcame that. I'm so lucky to have such a strong support circle. It's amazing. So without that, I probably wouldn't have gotten past that point. I would have dropped out right then. But as time went on, I had like an empty feeling within me, and I was going through this existential crisis the whole time, and school was just an anxious mess, to say the least. And I'm like really beating myself up the whole time as I'm going along. And then my junior year, I realized like I'm not really doing much about environmentalism. I have more tools than I had before, more knowledge, and what am I really doing? Am I staying true to my values? So I decided to reach out to this organization called Environmental Coalition at Virginia Tech, and that was a major turning point of my college career. I was able to connect with like-minded individuals and people who like really cared about each other, and at this moment I like to think that like some of the greatest people on this earth I have met because of that club. So that organization, once I joined that organization, I got involved with environmental activism, and the pipeline resistance was our main campaign when I first joined. I didn't know anybody going in there, and after that semester I had a whole new group of friends. So I decided to leave the fraternity and spend more time doing Environmental Coalition. And then the next month I became vice president, and we've been involved with the Radford Arsenal Resistance and a lot of other awesome campaigns, but that's besides the point. This whole time I'm like living with a battle about like how I'm living my life, doing all these things that aren't staying true to my values and being so wasteful, and I didn't know how to be sustainable. I really had no like individual skills. I've been like a mama's boy for a while, and she just always did everything for me. So like I was thrown into this world without really knowing much about anything, and I still don't know much about anything, but I'm okay with that now. I was always beating myself up in college, like really, really hard, even if I was getting good grades, or just about like the actions I was taking, because I wasn't living in harmony with the environment. I wasn't like staying true to my values, and that, beating myself up just led to more depression. And I forgot to mention, like this whole time I've kind of been practicing meditation and experiencing with that idea. And I've been reading a couple of books, and then one book really resonated with me, Joy on Demand, and that was also like another really big turning point of my college career, of like really sitting down to practice meditation and figuring out what it's like to be me and not just going through the motions. And I've always just had this, I've been really anxious my whole life, always had this voice in the back of my head, like, some kind of chatter going on. I'm always going a million miles per hour. And recently that has started to die down, and I've been able to find peace because of meditation. And a couple months ago I went to this meditation retreat here in Floyd with Insight, Southwest Virginia or something like that. And that experience propelled me to really explore meditation, and since I've graduated, I am getting ready to go to Thailand and go to a bunch of different meditation retreats there. And now I'm on this lifelong journey to figure out what it's like to be me and to fully experience life adventures without having this feeling of inadequacy, or did I do something wrong? Could I have done something different? I feel like I have the ability to have confidence in myself, and the experiences that I've learned in college, I think I give more value to the experience of learning about myself rather than learning about academia and education. And I'm just really, really grateful for having everything that I have in my life and being able to talk up in front of all you guys right now. So thanks for listening. And yeah.
We have 4 more names to put in the hat. Very exciting.
Nice job.
I just love the diversity of age range between the people, among the people who are here, and just the variety of the stories. All right, Rick P.
So is the theme like mistakes?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, so the theme is mistakes. So I'm divorced, and that's one. But no, there's more to there. So I got divorced last year, and the thing is, I got married at 26. We met when I was 20. So I spent my whole 20s with somebody. And we're homeowners, and you know, we did the whole married life thing. We had kids and everything. But I didn't realize this until I got divorced, that I actually had never lived on my own before. I basically went from my parents' house to being married. And so when I moved out and got my apartment, I got to go to Target for the first time and like buy my own soap, you know? And it was great. And so I got my apartment, and you know, I had like a table and a TV stand and a TV, and that was it. And so I went to Target and got a lamp and other things that I needed apparently in single life. So I get home and I have all this stuff from Target. I'm very self-empowered. I have very nice smelling soap that I want. And I put the lamp together that they, you know, sell at Target. And I go to turn it on, and there's no light bulb in it, because the light bulbs were always like above the sink. I didn't get that part, you know. And so I don't have any light in my apartment, but I have a nice lamp. And I go to take the garbage, you know, of the lamp into the garbage can under the sink. There's no garbage can. I didn't buy one of those. They don't give you those when you get apartments. I didn't know that part. And so I've got all this garbage that's just kind of piling up in the corner of my apartment that's also very empty. And I go to take a shower because I'm like, fine, it's at least light outside. I'll be okay for a while. I can survive in here with no light source. And I actually did think to buy a shower curtain because I noticed they don't give you shower curtains when you move in. So I bought a shower curtain, and I go to unpackage it, and they don't give you shower rings for the shower curtain. And I think that's, you know, it's kind of ironic and fitting because I just got divorced. Like, I don't need to buy anything with rings in it anyway. So I just kind of drape the shower curtain over the rod, and the water like shoots out over the floor. And I, you know, and I don't get down about this because this is my apartment and this is my mess I get to clean up. And, you know, it's just kind of interesting to think, and that was this year, that was 2017 in March when I really went on my own for the first time and learned all those lessons about various household goods that everyone needs. And I can pay my water bill now. I've got that. I know how to check my mail. And it's, you know, sure, it's like, it's very sad. You know, everyone says, like, I'm very sorry for your divorce. And I'm like, thank you. It's very nice of you. But, you know, in the same way, like, it's actually very self-empowering to have to go through this struggle on your own and learn really what you have about yourself that you can rely on. And beyond, you know, finally getting my own garbage can, like, a lot of it really is about just deciding and and learning about yourself. So I'm actually, in the long run, quite grateful for the struggle that I've been on. There's been a lot of other things that have been very hard, very trying to go through, and I wouldn't have been able to do any of those things without being divorced. And I think that's actually, I kind of treasure that. I'm grateful for it in a long way, because it taught me how strong I really am. And so while I wouldn't recommend the mistake of divorce, I would recommend finding something that is really going to challenge you in a very strong way, because I had no idea what I was capable of until that. And so I hope that you guys can find something, hopefully not that will teach you about yourself.
The story I'm about to tell you is true in every detail. I am not elaborating. There is no hyperbole here. I want you to know that in December of 1995, an amateur astronomer was searching the unknown skies and discovered something that no one had ever seen before. And this guy's name was Hyakutake. And so in March of 1996, Hyakutake became the largest comet to ever grace our skies in the past 100 years. At the same time, I was enduring a monastic marriage as a closeted gay man. And I decided that I would, out of utter desperation, chart a path through heretofore unexplored territory, which led me to take my kayak to the Edisto River in the county of Aiken, where the county seat is Aiken. And after I dragged my kayak across Aiken State Park, I was Aiken, and found that the river that supposedly made this park so wonderful was unbelievably trashy and really a wilderness, even at that part of South Carolina. So as the comet was making its way through the clear sky, I was groveling my way through a very crooked river in South Carolina, trying to chart my way to a new life, which was really quite a jungle at that point. The river twisted and turned so much that I described it as the telephone cord in a laundromat. I don't think any of you all have ever been to a laundromat, so you don't know exactly what the telephone cord looks like in a laundromat, but it does this, and that's what the river did through the swamp. And so I began to hear a noise. This was in March. It was warming up, but I was still wrapped up. And it was a cross between a cow and a diesel engine that maybe couldn't keep going. And then this utter pause in the wilderness. And it vibrated the bottom of my kayak, and I had no idea where it was coming from. And it was over there, which was a great relief because I was going this way on a water path that would turn that way and then go back another way, and then at the last minute came closer to... And the river was about as wide as from here to that wall, about 2 lengths of my kayak, which is 18 feet long. It's a sea kayak, so it's not made for turning sharp corners on a crooked river. There was a tree across the river, and it made sort of a narrow place that I could either go around the tree into a big bush, or I could go under the tree. And as I was trying to decide which way I went, I saw what was going. It was a mama gator. She was on her stick nest about this far off the water, and I was about this far down into the water, so that when my wooden paddle, which felt like a long potato chip, went into the water, my hand was actually in the water, and she was as long as my kayak, which is 18 feet long. And you know, and if you've ever been to Disney World, you've seen those animated alligators and how slow they move like this. Well, her jaw was as long as my arm, and let me tell you, that animation is not an exaggeration. When all of that jaw begins to move, it seems very slow, but I found out when the jaw opened where that sound was coming from, because her whole throat is the diaphragm for and I saw the teeth like a yellow roller coaster. And I imagined perhaps I had made a mistake in coming down the Edisto River. And then she closed her mouth and she flipped her tail so that the water went up into the branches of the tree. And before my tongue stuck to the top of my mouth, I uttered a 3-word prayer. I bet you can't think what it was.
Save my ass.
Pretty close. I wasn't that liberated at the time. It was God help me. And so, remembering what I had always told my scouts, I kept my eyes on where I wanted to go, never looked at the gator again, chose to go around the end of the tree and make a hard right, and looked down the river as the gator launched herself directly toward me under the water. I survived. And I stroked straight through the river and realized that my paddle was probably going right where the gator might be thinking to go. And so that's my story. And I want you to know I had considered that maybe it was the wrong thing to do, but I'm glad that I made it to tell you about it.
Okay, so hello everybody, my name is Aaliyah, and I didn't really plan on speaking. I probably thought I would, but I don't have necessarily a specific story, but basically what I've been experiencing lately is growing up, and it's so hard, and I don't like it, really. I think it's just like every day I feel my body getting kind of bigger, but I'm still pretty small, and there's more responsibilities and things I need to think about, and I have to deal with things more on my own, and I can't just call my dad all the time and be like, can you fix this for me, please? And he'll be like, I can try, but he lives in California. He's thousands of miles away. There's not much he can do. But really, what I have learned from growing up is that connection is the most important thing for me personally, is just your connection to your friends, to your environment, to your parents and everything, and that is really what has gotten me through the hardest times of my life. And so last year was my first year at college, and it was amazing because I had a really great group of friends, and I was living in a dorm, and it felt so safe, and I just went to school. I just wasn't worrying about a lot of stuff. Then I decided after that, I was like, I want to kind of take a break from school. And so this year I had planned on going, I wanted to travel. I was like, I'm going to go to Arizona and meditate with some guy and like, I don't know, be in like energy vortexes. I'm not sure, but that did not happen. I stayed in Blacksburg because I was going to tech, and yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. And so the summer was awesome. I was living with some girlfriends, and we just had this little nice comfy house. It was still hard. I was working a bunch. I had never been a waitress. I was supporting myself, and that was like, wow, that was a lot for me. And then after the summer, I had to move again, and so I found this like kind of really weird house to live in. It was like with older people that I didn't know well, and this other guy I didn't know well, but I was like, it looks cool, I think it'll be good. And so I was living there. It was definitely difficult. They're very wonky people, and they're wonky, I don't know what to say, but they're kind of offbeat. And they were two guys, and this little lady is just, at a point it just stopped working, and I had to move out. It was just an immediate eject, and that's happened before in my life. I've had to eject myself from situations, and so that happened, and I basically I didn't even have any place to live in Blacksburg, so I literally I just had to get on an airplane and go with my dad in California. He lives in Los Angeles, and it was terrible circumstances, kind of why I had to leave. And so when I was with my dad, it was just every day I would just be crying and being like, am I gonna be okay? Why did this happen to me? And just and he was like, yes, Lee, you're gonna be fine. It's okay. You're going to grow from this. But at that point, I really didn't think I was going to. And it's just so crazy because from his perspective, I'm his young daughter, and I have so many things that I'm going to do in my life, and I have basically everything at my hands, and I just couldn't see that. And but as the time went on, I was there for about a month, and it helped so much. It was a very healing experience for me, and my dad is my parent, but also my friend. He's we're partners in crime, basically, and I'm so grateful for that. And I would call my friends in Blacksburg, and I would definitely miss being in Blacksburg, but loved being in California. And then very recently I came back, and my mom lives in Virginia, so she's pretty close, so I can be with her, and I have really supportive friends. But I love my friends, I love my family. I would not be here without them. It's so important to have a support system. I just think that everyone here, gathering in places, is beautiful, and I love people, and that's it. Okay.
So, if there was going to be a title to my memoirs, it would be Reasons I Should Have Been Fired from Summer Camp. About the time that I was meeting Crystal, I was also starting to volunteer and then be paid by the Boy Scouts of America to work in their summer camp program. Some of you may have stumbled into it in your backyards around here. And at first, I was just your standard, I'm going to teach basketry and finger carving, and then this wonderful gentleman who is one part Green Man of the Woods, one part Davy Crockett, who lived down the street from me, said, we have a backpacking program. I'd really like you to come work for me. And I said, neat. Terrible idea. I spent 15 years doing it. And eventually I'd become 16, and most of if you were going to be a director, you had to be 18 or older. And but we had this living history program where you did Native American living. I don't know if you guys noticed, I am not Native American in the slightest. But he handed me a bunch of books. They had an Indian village already set up and said, hey, you're going to be great at this. And I was like, so my girlfriend came over and she made me leggings, and we figured out, we went with the books and the patterns and did everything. So at 16 years old, I am hanging out in a wigwam in Pulaski County with nothing but leggings and a loincloth and a long hunter shirt. This is awesome. And literally it was the greatest time of my life. Most of the time when I get board, I'm still going, why did I leave? But the story actually comes the next year, my second year of doing this. I am literally in the middle of 16,000 acres. The only thing I have is a radio that is powered by 2 lantern batteries that is circa World War II. If I hold my tongue just right, I can radio the base camp and ask for help. We have to be mostly self-sufficient where we are at. Now, we are not so far out that they will not hike people out to kind of see the Indian. But that's really about it. Everything else I have daily groups that hike out to me. We do a program, they go to bed, they leave. So I have large chunks of time where I am just in the wilderness. This is a very odd experiment in isolation. You start to get weird ideas. Mostly that you are far more capable than you actually are. So in 2004, we had a huge bear problem. It had been an incredibly dry winter, and the berries up on the hill weren't enough for them, so they were coming down into the campsites, and it was just, we were aware of this. I hadn't had any real issues until one day I am sitting and I'm doing my daily chores, and the base camp hikes in a bunch of the 10 to like 12-year-olds, and I'm doing my kind of living history speech for them, and I open it up for questions, and one of the little Johnny Scouts goes, "Mr. Indian? Yes? Is that bear always a part of your campsite?" No. So I usher them back across the bridge a safe distance, and I realize at this point that my only form of reliable communication is sitting on the bench, and the bear is about from me to this gentleman here from the bench. Neat. So I very quietly kind of saunter over and I grab the radio. Now, several things are crossing my mind at this point. First off, that this is a very odd-looking bear because he's maybe a yearling. So think teenager, very awkward. Long, lanky legs, weighs only about 150, 200 pounds. So not much bigger than me at the time. And secondly, he has no idea what he has stumbled into. We would make traditional hunting implements. We'd do blow darts, we would do atlatl spears, and I had foam hunting targets that looked like deer and turkey and all sorts of other wildlife. He didn't understand that they were foam. And since he was young, he was investigating this. So at first he was not paying attention to me. He was like, man, these are some dumb snacks. They are not running at all. And then he bit into one. He was not very impressed with what we had to offer. So I'm watching this and realize I have a radio in my hand. I should really call for help. Secondly, you're never supposed to say certain things over the radio because even though it's a licensed channel, there are people that can hear it, and we actually share that channel with a construction company in Roanoke. And with the way the mountains work, they can actually hear us better in Roanoke most of the time than the base camp can. And they love nothing more did you hear about the bear at the scout camp? So we were always using code words. So if we came across a snake, it was, hey, we have a lawyer here. If it was poisonous, they've got the juice. Just all sorts of bizarre things. But something that we hadn't really thought about is we had never come up with anything to say for a bear. I don't know why this had not crossed our minds. So I'm sitting there, and my outpost is called Hemlock Grove. Base camp, Hemlock Grove. Nothing. Base camp, Hemlock Grove. Nothing. One more time. Base camp, Hemlock Grove. Go ahead, Jawa. What's going on? That's what everyone calls me. And I'm going, there's a large friend in my outpost? Come again, Hemlock Grove? There's a large furry friend in my outpost. I'm not getting your meaning. What are you trying to tell us, Hemlock Grove? There's a large, black, furry friend in my outpost. Hemlock Grove, are you trying to say that Hightower's out there? Another one of our... I'm like, there's a bear. There's a bear in my outpost. He's staring at me. Oh, we'll send someone out there right away. From the base camp, if they are trucking it, it should have been no more than 5 to 10 minutes. So I'm thinking, I'm just going to stay here, and I'm going to make certain the youth are moving away and that the campsite is secured and he doesn't get into any garbage or things of that nature. And as I'm sitting on the picnic table watching this, and he's now set on his haunches, staring at me, can't decide whether he's trying to figure out if I'm lunch or if I'm a relative. Once again, the only thing I am wearing, breech clout, leggings, and I have a long hunter's knife on one side. Crazy things start to enter your head at this moment. The first of which being, so this is how I go. I can see the headlines now. Local youth devoured at scout camp. Not bad. I'll take it. But then it gets crazier. You're sitting there and you're staring at this animal who, by all rights, is made to eat things your size. And you're going, he's not so big. I've lived in the woods now for many a year. I could totally take him with my knife. Which is when I discovered that there's a voice in every human's head. There's the normal chatter that we all hear, but then there's that one small, still voice. I like to think that most of the time they're in an armchair somewhere, reading Proust, like being very intelligent, and they only speak up when you truly need them. Well, this voice got very loud. It's a bear. He has 5 knives on either hand. You're not going to win. Good point. I'm going to sit down and shut up. At this point, I feel a hand on my shoulder. I look, and it is our camp director, Ken Lyons. Now, Ken is 6'6", former rugby player and mechanical engineer graduate from Virginia Tech. He's about 10 years older than I am. 15 years older than I am. And he is just this monster of a man. When you think of like lumberjack manliness, this is him. He's svelte. He's got tree trunks for legs. He is in the standard issue Boy Scout booty shorts because he can. Shaved bald head, immaculately groomed jet black goatee. Wool socks up to his knees. Somewhere between scout and parochial schoolgirl. But he looks at me and he says, "Are you done taking pictures?" I ain't got no camera. Good. Let's get this bear out of here. And then somewhere, magically, I don't know where he produced this from those shorts, because there wasn't a lot left to the imagination, but a 9mm Walther pistol. And he fires it in the air and just screams, "Yeah, bear!" and charges the bear. I felt bad for it. The look of sheer terror on this animal's face. It didn't know what to do. It had seen a Sasquatch, and it was coming for it. So he chases it down the trail. "Yeah, bear!" fires another round, and I am just gobsmacked. And all of the small children across the bridge are cheering in delight, because this is the greatest show on earth. And they run up the straight side of the mountain into the wilderness, and you can just kind of vaguely hear, "Pow! Yeah, bear!" And they disappear. And then dead silent. And only Ken returns about 5 minutes later. Kind of dusts off his hands, puts the pistol back into whatever pocket dimension were in those Boy Scout shorts, and says, "I don't think he'll return." I said, "I don't think I will either." I would come back for 12 more years. So that's the end of my story. Thank you.